Yes, our good friend the owl.
Comes in the nick of time.
Yes, the
Hoo,
owl
hoo,
does.
hoo,
Beautiful
hoo,
owl.
hoo, 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 hoo. Okay, you've done your job for tonight. Take a
Yes.
rest.
Good evening. Welcome to Around the World with Dee and Friends. Tonight, I am happy to be here with my good friend Madelyn Hoffman. And
Hello,
Madelyn is in
everybody.
Colombia. And we're going to be talking about the article, Why Does the U.S. Support Israel? A Geopolitical Analysis with Madelyn Hoffman.
It isn't my analysis. It's Ben Norton who interviewed
Michael Hudson.
Michael Hudson. I was going to say Michael Hughes, and I knew that was wrong. Michael Hudson. So we're going to be, borrowing from their analysis. And actually, I mean, we've done a couple shows using Ben Norton's analysis already, but this is going back to before the genocide. No, before
Yes.
the genocide, this stage of the genocide. Um, where Norton was analyzing all the different ways in which the IDF and Israel were already providing data, results of quote unquote experiments with weapons. Um, and I think we understood just how vast Israel's influence was, but
Yes.
I think I feel like I'm being hit over the head with it again and being reminded of because it's even more than what we talked about, I think.
Yes.
Um, because it's not just quote unquote Latin America, West Asia, but it's expanded to many countries. And so I know it's time to revisit this whole issue.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
and then there's all the artificial intelligence data centers and the connection between the AI data centers and the protests against them for environmental and economic reasons, but also because so much of the AI can be controlled by and utilized by Israeli intelligence, the Mossad. Um, we're kind of, I got two words that come to mind, but I don't think I can use either one on the air. Um, I mean, if things continue this way without somebody intervening, as Dee and I were talking about just a little while ago, the world is in deep trouble. I can say that, right? And
Yes,
you
yes, yes. The world is in deep trouble.
and you can imagine what other words could be used for that. Mm,
Hmm.
because this is not a game.
It's
This
not.
is
It's scary.
Yeah, and it's not conspiracy theory. It's real.
Right.
Um, and we we've got to find out, we've got to figure out where the quote unquote heroes and heroines are, which
Yes.
countries, which individuals. Gustavo Petro is still fighting. His presidency is over on August 7th. He will not be quiet before that. He may not be quiet after that. He said
Right.
he was going to take a few vacations. He hasn't taken a single one in 4 years. Um, but it depends if there's a case pending before one of these election groups or government watchdogs in Colombia. I don't remember exactly which agency. And they accepted the case that calls for the nullification of the elections at the end of July, of the end of June, right? June. So if they still are examining the case, it'd be hard to imagine that any government body would nullify the results of a of an election that just took place. On the other hand, Petro and his team are thorough. They would provide the best evidence they could possibly find. Um,
Hmm.
it would be it would be such an amazing moment should they do that. Um, should they accept Petro's team's report on the fraud and the constitutional issues, the fact that Abelardo is from the United States, well, is a U.S. citizen now, though he was born in Colombia, and he's trying to move. He wants to move the capital of Colombia out of Bogota, just like that, and move it to Cali, in the middle of much more militarized areas. And Petro wants to do everything he possibly can to block that
Right.
because because the Colombian government isn't a military government, or
No.
it's it at least for the last 4 years anyway. It's worked very, very hard to be a civilian government, and to make um, to work on process negotiations and processes to bring about peace. So um, it's really, and I mean, this will say everything you need to know. Abelardo wants to vacate the Casa de Nariño, which is the Orange House, and turn it into a museum. But
He's acting like Trump.
why are you surprised?
We're just going to go
Because
in here and do what we want. We're just,
yeah, I mean, he's got the full support of Trump,
hmm
and Marco Rubio. In fact, and this is news too, but I don't know who all is listening. I hope it may not be news to you. You know that near approximately 100-page report, which names quote unquote enemies of the United States, um, gets into a deep analysis of Cuba. It also includes Pacto Histórico. Pacto Histórico is the political party or coalition of political parties that elected Gustavo Petro the first 4 years ago, and backed Ivan Cepeda, and got over 12 million votes. But they're the enemy somehow. And then the Alianza Verde, for all of us Greens, it's not a great sign, but the Alianza Verde ultimately endorsed Abelardo. So it just seems really weird that they should be on this blacklist.
yes.
Um, but life in Colombia and political life, you're going to be. I'm only on once a week, so you won't hear that much from me. But almost every week, I expect for a while, you'll be hearing news from Colombia, and then Brazil, Nicaragua. They're both saying no more elections. Well, Nicaragua says no more elections. They have elections scheduled for October, and some people in the world are saying, see, told you that the Nicaraguan government was anti-democratic. But what they're not telling you is Nicaragua doesn't want any outside interference.
Right.
So the one way to prevent that is to discontinue elections, and then same thing in Brazil. Um, Lula has been saying he doesn't want two um, He doesn't want two representatives from the US to come to Brazil to talk about the upcoming elections in Brazil,
Okay.
because if you, because if you let people in to talk about it, then what you're doing is you're opening the door for outside intervention. And one of the people who's running is the son of Bolsonaro. And we remember Bolsonaro from Brazil about 10 years ago.
Yes.
I've forgotten his first name, but he was, ripping up the Amazon by leaps and bounds, and he was making people very angry. He was a dictator, and the U.S. is, I am sure, wants to open the door and pave the way for his son to become president. And Lula is saying, no, no. Um, yeah, well, it did. Evelina, they said no more elections. Um, Maybe I missed an update on that. Um, but whatever they're doing it to prevent or to try to prevent U.S. interference um, in their upcoming elections. If you have a link to an article, I would love to see it. And then, yeah, an entire Afro community in Cali is being displaced forcefully, houses bulldozed like in Gaza. I don't. I will look for that. Um, and I mean, I have friends in Cali. I have quite a few friends who live in Cali because we're part of a book group and we've been reading a lot together. But I won't ask publicly. I'll ask the leader of that group if he can let me know, because it's not a political group. Um, Even though we just read To Kill a Mockingbird, um, and for me, I read it in Spanish. Um, Yeah, so Wayne says Lula expelled Israeli ambassador. Yes, doing long term goals. Ukraine wants to go to war, Iran now. Yeah, I mean, all of this. How are we going to make all of this stop, Dee? How are we going to make it all stop?
Right now, as much as they want to do so many different things, there's the issue with, say, the energy. I mean, the ability to make different weapons as well. The rare earth minerals. China is the one, has a lot. Like the U.S. has a problem now because of what the tariffs and where China is concerned. The U.S. was going to go ahead and create its own, um, would do its own mining, and they were going to get rid of, getting stuff from China or elsewhere. Well, guess what? The U.S. is,
You,
they're not in shape right now. They don't have the stuff they need. They're behind. So,
you know where the United States goes to do the mining, right? Depending
mhm.
on the type of mining, Bolivia, um, Brazil, Congo, um, Sudan. It depends because there's a lot, the rare earth minerals, the um, lithium for cell phones, etc. I know I have my phone sitting here. I'm looking at it saying, I'm part of the problem. I have my computer here. I'm part of the problem. Um,
Well, the U.S.
but
needs
we're not.
certain things that they would get from China to build military weapons and stuff. I can't. I don't know the exact stuff. It's on my timeline. I
But
posted
where would
some.
China get it from?
No, no. China has this stuff. They said between China, North Korea, Russia, that region. The U.S. was always getting stuff from China when it came to the rare earths and stuff. So, the U.S. has got themselves in a mess. Europe has itself in a mess. Um, gambling. Gambling with the fact of them thinking they could handle the changes. Um, future changes, how they were doing stuff. Um, they had their way of doing it, believing they could do things a certain way economically, with sanctions and different things like that. Well, guess what? That didn't work out for them.
It's
Uh,
not legal either.
and they're falling apart because you have China, for example, like you said, they're focused on building industry. They build themselves up. They're focusing on the future. China, like I said, China's has their thought process, and then you have the United States and Europe with a different thought process. Well, guess what? The West is losing right now in so many areas. They're falling apart. So how are they going to be able to sustain themselves when it comes to different battles?
Well, you're going to go with Donald Trump's narcissism because he thinks he can do anything. But he's going to wind up falling on his own, as they say, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And I don't mean that literally. I just mean, you want to create military messes. Well, create them, and then they're going to come back and bite you in the you know what.
Mhm.
Evelina says Nicaragua is banning candidates who are funded by the U.S. Okay, that makes sense. Um, and unfortunately, Colombia didn't do that soon enough, though that's part of Colombia's or Petro's case to nullify the election. So, you know, we all know that we don't win every battle. But if we're on the correct side of history with those battles, we have to fight them anyway, and we have to see what'll happen.
Okay, let me bring us, before we run too late, into the article we're going to be discussing. Okay,
Okay.
let me get that up in the room. There we go. Share the screen. Here we go. This is from Janata Weekly.
That's a new publication on me.
Yes,
Um, but do you want to read it, Dee?
I'll read it because you got to save your voice, and you
I
just
do.
pause me. You pause me when you need, when you want to respond.
Okay.
Why does the U.S. support Israel? A geopolitical analysis with economist Michael Hudson.
Whom I know a lot of people like. He's very, very smart and right on most of the time.
Okay, and this article actually was written November 18th of 2023.
Oh, it's a long time ago. Mm. But
Okay,
things have only become clearer in the last 3 years.
yes. Ben Norton interviews economist Michael Hudson to explore the reasons why Israel is such an important part of U.S. foreign policy and Washington's attempt to dominate not only the region of the Middle East, but really the entire world.
Yeah, it's become very obvious.
Hmm. We're watching it. Okay, you want me to read
Watching
it?
and trying to change it.
Okay, this is an introduction. Geopolitical Economy Report editor Ben Norton interviewed economist Michael Hudson to explore the reasons why Israel is such an important part of U.S. foreign policy and Washington's attempt to dominate not only the region of the Middle East, but really the entire world. It is crucial to stress that Israel is an extension of U.S. geopolitical power in one of the most critically important regions of the world.
And I would say more than one. We've seen Latin America, for example. So at least two very important regions of the world.
Mhm. In fact, it was and at that time in 2023 was Joe Biden was president. It says here, in
Yeah, and
fact, it was current U.S. President Joe Biden back in 1986 when he was a senator who famously said that if Israel didn't exist, the United States would have to invent it.
Now, I want to add here that we have looked at in depth one of Ben Norton's articles about this, extremely long. We talked about it over a couple days. So he was aware of the influence of the IDF in Colombia going back 30, 40 years. And Colombia, for example, was called the Israel of the middle of Latin America for quite some time. And then Petro started moving Colombia in a different direction. But, you know, times with Abelardo wasn't long before he started walking around in Colombia with and getting photographed anyway, carrying a Star of David flag. So we'll see where all that goes.
Okay. If we look at the Middle East, I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel.
Wait a minute. Go back. We stop those of us who support as most. Wait a minute. What's he talking about here? Um. Okay. All
Okay.
right. There's no apology to be made. None. All right. But I don't understand that
Yeah,
sentence.
yeah.
Were
It is
there not?
crucial to
Go ahead.
stress that Israel is an extension, we talked about that, of U.S. political power in one of the most critically important regions of the world. And then we said with Joe Biden, and oh yeah, if in fact it was
All right.
U.S. President Joe Biden back in 1986 when he was a senator who famously said that if Israel didn't exist, the United States would have to invent it. If we
So
look at
yeah.
and if we look at that, if we look at the Middle East, I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body for apologizing for our support for Israel.
Right. I think we need to read this paragraph though. I am with my colleagues because there's certain things that were left out. Oh no, it's up there.
Yeah.
It's
He says
it's
there
odd.
is no apology to be made. None. It is the best 3 billion investment we make.
I
Oh, that
guess
was
that's
Joe
what
Biden.
President Biden said.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel. I am with my colleagues who are on the floor of the Foreign Relations Committee, and we worry at length about NATO, and we worry about the eastern flank of NATO, Greece and Turkey, and how important it is. They pale by comparison.
I guess we're still listening to something that Biden said. Okay,
Yeah.
because otherwise it makes no sense. I mean, I didn't think that Hudson or Norton would say those things.
No, no, he's saying what
Okay.
Biden
Yeah, what
said.
Biden said. Huh?
They pale by comparison in terms of the benefit that accrues to the United States of America. First of all, it goes without saying that the so-called Middle East, or a better term
Hmm.
is West Asia, has some of the world's largest reserves of oil and gas, and that entire economic infrastructure all around the world relies on fossil fuels. The world is gradually moving toward new energy sources, but fossil fuels are still absolutely critical to the entire global economy, and Washington's goal has been to make sure that it can maintain steady prices in the global oil and gas markets. But this is about something much bigger than just oil and gas. The U.S. military's stated policy since the 1990s, since the end of the Cold War and the overthrow of the Soviet Union, is that the United States has tried to maintain control over every region of the world.
Yeah, I didn't attend in person, but there was a Green Party annual national meeting in Chicago last weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and we heard from Ali Abunama from Electronic Intifada, Medea Benjamin, and Craig McIver. He made an incredible speech about how all these areas that are discussed here of the all these areas of the world are currently threatened, and this is only 3 years old, this article, so nothing has really changed. It's only intensified,
Yes, it has.
um, and it was funny because during some of the discussion that followed, people were saying, "Well, look, the Greens are talking about the need for gas and oil," and then somebody said, "But no, we're not really. We're talking about the realities on the ground right now and what the fights are over." And yeah, I mean, one way out of this mess is to go for renewables. But until such time as that occurs, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, um, um, United States, Iran, um, all battling over oil, Venezuela, all battling over oil. So, as much as we know that we need to transition away, and again, some of the Latin American countries, especially Colombia, were have been working to and Colombia and Cuba have
Mm-hmm.
been working to get off petroleum as the basis for the economy and energy, the
Mm-hmm.
transition. And Colombia and Lula have worked hard to protect the Amazon against, the need or the perceived need. Bolsonaro was just giving away land like crazy.
That was
Um,
sickening. That was sickening back then.
yeah, and taking away the function of the Amazon rainforest as a filter for pollution and for keeping things clean, taking away some of the lungs of the earth, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I mean, it's very important the progress that's been made and to preserve the progress that's been made. Anyway, go on.
Okay. This was stated very clearly by the U.S. National Security Council in 1992 in the so-called Wolfowitz Doctrine.
Oh, good old Paul Wolfowitz. Ugh.
The U.S. National Security Council wrote, "The United States' goal is to preclude any hostile power from dominating a region critical to our interest, and also thereby to strengthen the barriers against the reemergence of a global threat to the interest of the U.S. and our allies. These
Uh,
re-
that's that's also the project for a new American century. Haven't
Mhm.
heard that referred to in a long time, but it's not it's described but not defined here, not named. But
Okay.
if any but if anybody wants to read the Project for a New American Century and the National Military Strategy, you can go and look. I think it was 1997, 1998. You can read this whole idea here of full spectrum dominance in the report from the Project for a New American Century. Paul Wolfowitz, George W. Bush, no, Jeb Bush, Wolfowitz, Jeb Bush, Donald Rumsfeld. Remember those names?
Oh,
They
yeah, sure do.
well, their report is the basis for some of this, and anybody is welcome to go and read it for more information.
Okay. These regions include Europe, East Asia, the Middle East, Persian Gulf, and Latin America. Consolidated Non democratic control of the resources of such a critical region could generate a significant threat to our society.
Security, actually, but
Yeah,
both
critical
work.
security, yeah. Then in 2004, the US government published its national military strategy, in which Washington stressed that its goal was full spectrum dominance, the ability to control any situation or defeat any adversary across the range of military operations. Now, historically, when it came to the Middle East, the US relied on so-called twin pillar strategy. The West pillar was Saudi Arabia and the East pillar was Iran.
Hmm.
And until the 1979 revolution in Iran, the country was governed by a dictator, a Shah, the monarch who was backed by the United States and served U.S. interests in the region. However, with the 1979 revolution, the U.S. lost one of the pillars of its twin pillar strategy, and Israel became increasingly important for the United States to maintain control over this crucially strategic region. It is not just the massive oil reserves and gas reserves in the region. It is not just the fact that many of the world's top oil and gas producers are located in West Asia. It is also the fact that some of the most important trading routes on Earth also go through this region.
Should you? Can you go up and let's take a look at the chart?
Okay.
The 10 largest oil producers and share of total world oil production in 2022. US is right up there at the top.
Hmm.
Um, and then Saudi Arabia, of course, then Russia. Um, then, and so 20% of the world's total, 12%, 11%, um, Canada 6. Yeah, it goes down pretty fast, but after the top 3, but the top 10 in total at in 2022, which included Kuwait, Iran, Brazil, United Arab Emirates, Iraq, China, Canada, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and US, accounted for 73% of the world's oil production in 2022. I didn't realize that was so much, the top 10.
Hmm.
I don't know, where it stands today, but it's not that different, I assume. Although I'm surprised Venezuela isn't in there.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know. Maybe they were not, maybe whoever generated this chart didn't want to include them because it was not part of, you know, I don't know. I don't know. But it's interesting. Thank you for letting us take a look at that.
Okay. Okay. It would be difficult to overstate how important Egypt's Suez Canal is.
Mm,
This connects trade from the Middle East going into Europe, from the Red Sea into the Mediterranean, and around 30% of the world's shipping containers pass through the Suez Canal. That represents about 12% of the total global trade of all goods. Then, directly south of the Suez Canal, where the Red Sea enters the Arabian Sea, you have a crucial geostrategic choke point known
yeah.
as the Bab al Mandab Strait, right
Yeah,
off
they
the coast of Yemen. Yes, we're familiar with that
talk
one.
about that a lot. I wonder if this article's going to mention the Strait of Hormuz.
I was thinking the
Well,
same thing.
let's see. Hmm.
And there, more than 6 million barrels of oil pass through every single day.
Yeah, well,
Wow.
Yemen
Yeah,
is
Yemen.
pretty much controls that, right?
Yes.
At this point, I remember when we first started talking about Yemen's involvement. People were a little skeptical. Oh, there's the Strait of Hormuz. People were a little skeptical about how much impact or power Yemen could have. Boy, have they had a lot of impact on on the world on the world's trade and on the shipments of oil, etc. Look at that.
Oops, let me bring it back up again. Kind of slid out of the way there, but here
It's all
we
right.
see that's the Suez Canal over here. There's Jordan,
Yeah, the Strait of
Egypt.
Hormuz is to the east,
Yeah, and you
and
see
the
Strait of Hormuz. There's the UAE. There's Oman.
and what it says it mentions the Strait of Hormuz in the caption underneath the map, but it's hard to read.
Okay.
Um, can you
Well, let
read
me look.
it?
Yeah, I
Can
can read that.
Okay. Wow, it's a
Okay.
lot.
It says here the Bab el Mandab Strait is a sea route checkpoint between
Choke
the
point.
choke
Choke
point.
point.
Yeah, between the Horn of Africa and the Middle East, connecting the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden and the Arabian Sea. Most exports of petroleum and natural gas from the Persian Gulf that transit the Suez Canal or the Sumed pipeline pass through both the Bab el Mandeb
Mm.
and the Strait of Hormuz.
And the Strait of Hormuz. Mm.
Choke points are narrow channels along widely used global sea routes that are critical to global energy security. The Bab el Mandab Strait is 18 miles wide at its narrowest point,
Wow.
lim- limiting tanker traffic to two 2-mile wide channels for inbound and outbound shipments. Closure of the Bab el Mandab Strait could keep tankers originating in the Persian Gulf from transiting the Suez Canal or reaching the Sumed pipeline, forcing them to divert around the southern tip of Africa, which would increase the transit time and shipping cost. Yes, I remember that when they had to do
Hmm.
that. And here, in 2018, an estimated 6.2 million barrels per day um, of crude oil, condensate, and refined petroleum products flow through the Bab el Mandeb Strait towards Europe, the United States, and Asia, an increase from 5.1 million BD in 2014.
Barrels a day.
Yeah,
Barrels a
barrels a
day.
day. Yeah, total petroleum flows through the Bab el Mandeb Strait, accounted for about 9% of total sea-borne trade petroleum, crude oil, and redefined petroleum products in 2017. About 3.6 million barrels a day moved north toward Europe. Another 2.6 million barrels a day flowed in the opposite direction, mainly to Asian markets such as Singapore, China, and India.
India. And this was all prior to the U.S. Israel war of choice and aggression
Hmm.
against Iran. It's very interesting to read all this. I mean, obviously, the information was widely available,
Yes.
and both Israel and Iran and the United States said, "Oh, screw this! We're going to mess with these and we're going to take it over. Not
Hmm.
even that we're just going to mess with it, but we're going to take it over." So arrogant and
It is.
so aggressive and so illegal.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's rampant. It's just rampant pirates. Like when we were talking earlier, it's like the wild, wild west. It's It's maddening, this. Just thinking you could steal and do whatever the hell you want.
We need to somebody, and I'm sure they have. I just haven't seen it. A cartoon of Trump, Hegseth, Rubio, and Netanyahu with patch over one eye, and you know
Hmm.
the Buccaneers,
Yeah.
the pirates of the seas. But no, they need to be stopped. But they're not.
Yes.
Nobody's doing that. Okay.
Historically, the United States has tried to dominate this region in order to maintain control, not only of energy supplies, but also to ensure these global trade routes that the entire globalized neoliberal economic system is built on. That word,
Mm-hmm.
neoliberal.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And as U.S. influence in the region has weakened in an increasingly multipolar world,
Ha!
yeah,
Sore
Israel
losers, the U.S. and Israel.
loses exactly. Israel has become increasingly important for the United States to try to maintain control.
I just want to add, Evelina has some commentary here. One about the Green Party and the Libertarian Party. I will come back to that one because we're talking oil, not political parties. But she added that sanctions on Venezuela negatively impacted oil production and crippled oil refineries. And then, even though Venezuela is one of the top three sources of crude oil, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, I'm not sure why it doesn't show up on that chart. Um, and I don't know. Kathleen talks about great shaking could be imminent. Is that the loosening of the sixth seal? I know
Mhm.
nothing. I know nothing about that. But you might. Okay, continuing on.
We can see this clearly in the discussions over oil prices through OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, which has essentially been expanded and is now known as OPEC Plus to include Russia. Now, Saudi Arabia and Washington's archenemy, Russia, play a key role in determining global oil prices.
Oh, so that's so terrible.
I
We need
know.
to we need to fund Ukraine to eliminate Russia off the face of the earth, which they are not going to be able to do.
No.
Hmm.
Historically, Saudi Arabia was a loyal U.S. proxy, but increasingly Riyadh has been maintaining a more non aligned foreign policy. And
Well,
it,
yeah, I mean, update to 2026. We're not quite sure where Saudi Arabia stands now, are we?
no,
I mean, they want nukes. Uh, I don't know if that's going to happen because they still, in order to join the Abraham Accords, they have to give up their goal of a free Palestine. So I don't know what's going to happen.
and a very big reason for that is that China is now the biggest trading partner of many of the countries in the region. For a decade, China has been the largest importer of oil and gas from the Persian Gulf. Furthermore, through its global infrastructure project, the Belt and Road Initiative, China is moving the center of world trade back to Asia. And the Belt and Road Initiative, the road in particular, is a reference to the new Silk Road.
Yeah, and here's another map.
Oops,
Um,
this down a bit. Yep, another map.
but let's see. Let's orient ourselves.
Oh,
Uh,
let me see. Rotterdam
um,
is Moscow, Istanbul, Trieste, Athens, Tehran is here.
oh, okay. Where's Tehran? Right there in the middle.
Right there, yes.
Hmm.
Look at this thing. There's the red
Well,
line.
they crisscross each other, don't they?
Yeah,
The is there a key?
I'm trying to
Um,
see where. Okay,
if
here,
we
let's
can go
just.
down a little further.
Yeah, see what
Yeah,
each. Okay,
the red is the new Silk Road. Yeah,
yeah.
and the green are MENA countries with comprehensive strategic partnerships. I know Afghanistan is a part of that, but they're not on this map. Um, Maritime Silk Road is the blue. That's
Hmm.
a that's extensive.
Yeah, because here's India down here. It's Jakarta.
Yeah,
And there's Singapore, then you go all over here.
that's Asia. Yeah, West
Yeah,
East Asia, right? West Asia.
yeah. And then yeah. So it goes all over, yeah.
Well, this is where geopolitical concerns come in, and this is what Ben Norton focuses on.
Hmm.
And I think I mean, this is giving me some idea. This is not my
Okay,
strength.
right. So here we are looking over.
What?
I'm looking at
Okay,
the.
that's Russia. That's Russia.
Yeah, and then you go, here's Tehran.
Mm-hmm.
I go into Istanbul,
Istanbul,
Moscow.
Moscow,
Okay,
Rotterdam. Yeah. I
and
mean, is that's still being constructed
I haven't
or
heard
being
too much about.
used?
I
Yeah.
haven't heard too much lately about that.
Yeah.
We'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you guess which region is absolutely crucial in the new Silk Road
Hmm.
and the Belt and Road Initiative? Well, of course, it's the Middle East. Or, again, a better term is West Asia. And that term actually much better explains the geostrategic importance of this region because it connects Asia to Europe.
Mm.
This also explains why the United States has been so desperate to try to challenge the Belt and Road with its own attempts to build a new trade route. In
Mm.
particular, the US is trying to make a trade route going from India
Mm.
into the Persian Gulf and then up through Israel. So, in all of these projects, Israel plays an important role as an extension of U.S. imperial power in one of the most important regions of the world. That is why Biden said back in 1986 that if Israel didn't exist, the U.S. would have to invent it. This is also why Biden repeated this in a White House meeting with Israel's President Isaac Herzog on October 27th, 2022. We're also going to discuss the ironclad commitment.
Mm.
And this is, I'll say this 5,000 times in my career, the ironclad commitment the United States has to Israel based on our principles, our ideas, our values. They're the same values.
Genocidal, apartheid, racist, aggressor, militaristic, um,
Yeah,
shared values. Uh huh.
yeah, shared values. Yeah,
Disgusting.
it
But
is. And
it's true. But it's
it's
true.
true. It's true. It's terrible. And that's what they don't see anything wrong with what they do.
No, not really, although some of those people like Anthony Blinken and others are starting to say, oh, maybe we should have been tougher on Israel. And then somebody else responded by saying, you don't get to do that. You
Mhm.
don't get to take back what you have already done.
Right.
You went into it fully, all all four legs and arms and hands and feet, and now you can't say, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done it, maybe we should. It's done. What's done is done, and you all are war criminals, and the world needs to treat you as such. But I'm just going to throw this in here. I found it very upsetting because today, because I'm sure many of you have heard Mamdani's speech about, uh, well, I don't have the power to arrest war criminal Netanyahu, but the president of the United States can do that. And then Danny Dannon, some diplomat from Israel, says, no, 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 Mamdani, you are the one who needs to be arrested. And I want to know what the heck, would people be arresting Mamdani for, when there's a warrant out for Netanyahu's arrest? Um, but these same forces are trying to fight that and trying to dismantle the ICC.
Hmm.
It's
Disgusting.
oh, such a mess. Hmm.
Yes, there was the U.S. part of all of this after World War II with all this creation, and
Hmm.
but doesn't apply to the U.S. The U.S. thinks nothing applies to it, but it's for others.
Well, and it doesn't apply to it, and it doesn't apply to Israel. And some people, in both the House and Senate, had voted, though it didn't pass yet, um, to merge the two militaries,
It's
to merge
infuriating.
the U.S. and Israeli militaries. And a lot of, some activists are saying that that's actually
It is.
treason to vote for that, because a foreign army, are we at the mercy of the? Now it didn't pass.
Right.
It passed in the House and it didn't pass in the Senate, but a much too narrow a margin.
Right,
Um,
because you just think any country. And it's not because it's Israel, it's because it's any foreign entity, any foreign country we should not be merging.
nope, nope. Um, but there you go. Anyway, I don't know. I haven't read enough about the whole thing to know if they're gonna try to reintroduce it and push it after the midterms. After the midterms, they might have even less of a chance of it passing. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know, what the plans are. We're in almost in August. So we have August, September, October, 3 months plus a little bit before the midterms. So we'll see.
Okay, and I have often said, Mr. President Herzog, if there were not an Israel, we would have to invent one.
Wait a minute. He's okay. He's repeating it again. All right.
Yeah, and even as recently as
Hmm.
October 18th, 2023, Biden once again repeated the same thing in a speech he made in Israel. I have long said if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent it.
And he also said he was a proud Zionist. So,
Yes, he did.
and he didn't say it until somebody told him you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. And he
Hmm.
said, "Okay, then I'm a Zionist and proud of it."
Yeah.
Ooh, 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 ooh. I mean, I don't. I was raised to believe in the state of Israel. I was raised by a great aunt who worked hard in Israel, and she bought the bonds, and she tried to convince my brother and me, to go to Israel and to support Israel. So a lot of this discussion, I mean, maybe 3 years ago I wouldn't have been having it. I wouldn't have been able. I mean, I would criticize some of what Israel was doing, but now, my goodness, what the Zionist movement has done, um, I can't sit still for it. I mean, jumping up and down and saying it's got to stop.
Right.
Um,
It,
mm,
you don't know what to say.
no, no, we're running out of things to say, really,
Hmm. Okay.
because no, but because what's being done is so threatening to world order and security, but it,
Definitely.
it keeps going on, and we keep saying it has to stop. And Iran is put its foot down, and they're getting pummeled, but they're pummeling people back.
Right.
Um, on principle, not because we're warmongers and we want to destroy you. On principle. Um, so thanks, Iran, Yemen. Don't know Lebanon. No, Syria. No. I mean, there are countries that need to be supported for their sovereignty, but they don't have the ability to make a strong stance to stop anything. And
Right.
like Turkey goes back and forth. He Erdogan says some very strong things, but doesn't act on them.
No.
So I don't know. I don't know where we are, but I'm sorry. Go on.
In that speech in 2023, Biden traveled to Israel in order to support the country as it was carrying out a brutal bombing campaign in Gaza and ethnically cleansing Palestinians as part of what many experts around the world had referred to as a textbook case of genocide.
And here we are
Yep.
in almost in August of 2026. We're approaching 3 years in. The genocide continues, and still people try to pretend that it's not a genocide.
Top United Nations experts have warned that the Palestinian people are in danger of genocide by Israel. And the
Yeah,
United States has steadfastly been supporting Israel because, once again, as Joe Biden said, Israel is an extension of U.S. imperial power in West Asia. And if it didn't exist, Washington would have to invent it. Below follows a transcript of the interview that Geopolitical Economy Report editor Ben Norton conducted with the economist Michael Hudson, author of many books, including Super Imperialism: The Economy of American Empire.
I'm gonna leave you here. I don't know how long is the interview. It could be pretty long. The transcript, I mean. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
because I think I
very
wanted
long.
to go back and forth with you with it, unless
Yeah, but I can't do it tonight. I cannot do it tonight.
mm,
That is so long. We'll be here until midnight. I cannot do it.
no.
I'm sorry, but we can take it and go through it in parts next time I'm on.
Yeah, next time you're on. So why don't we discuss comments and
Yeah, I've been getting most of them, but now Kathleen has a bunch. Let's see. All right, so the first, I want to go back to Evelina's comment about the Green Party and the Libertarian Party forming a coalition to compete in upcoming elections. That's the first I've heard of it, Evelina. So I don't know if there's an official statement or an official um, goal to do that. I really don't know, but I will keep my eyes and ears open. And then we in talking about why Venezuela wasn't on that chart, um, because of the sanctions. Um, they either weren't producing or they weren't allowed to sell. So, that affected the numbers. Um, and then Kathleen, justice and righteousness. Um, Railroad reminds me of John Galt. I'm not sure. Were we talking about railroad? I don't remember. Cannibals? I have no idea.
Hmm.
Thanks, Dolores. I don't know. At 9:26, I don't know what she was thanking you for. Wow, I can't either, and being persecuted for protesting. Yeah. Oh, she's still feeding the band of 6 raccoons.
Okay.
Squirrel acting like a cat eating pumpkin seeds.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, and then Kathleen says Bernie, Libertarian, could help Green Party. Bernie will not help Green Party. Bernie had his chance to do so. He had his chance to even run as a candidate for the Green Party, and
Hmm.
he wanted to stay as far as possible away from the Greens, because he's committed to the Democrats,
Yeah.
um, even as an independent. All right, I'm sorry, Dee. I have to bail on you now.
Okay, I'm going to go
Uh,
head over to X, over to
okay.
Almy and Dean and go over some stories.
Yeah, I know you're just warming up, but I had, like I said, I had an unexpected meeting come up between 8 and 9, more or less, and I talked too much.
Yes.
Surprise, apart.
Surprise,
Surprise, surprise.
surprise.
Yeah. So good night, Dee, and I'll see you all, and good night, everybody in the room. I'll be back either late this week or the weekend,
Right.
or Monday of next week.
Yeah.
And thank you, Dee, and thank you for
Yeah, this was a good for us to talk about tonight because it applies today, the
yeah,
Strait of Hormuz and with Yemen and
yeah.
all of
And so that interview will be very useful, I'm sure. But I can't do any more tonight.
right.
So
Okay.
save
So
it for another day.
yeah,
Okay.
so
Good night, Dee.
good night, and I'm going to take us over to X right now.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Ooh, and who's drowning here? Did the war on Iran mark the end of U.S. hegemony? That's been the question. The balance of power is shifting. According to, let me take these up, bring this up here. The balance of power is shifting. According to the report, globalization has broken the monopoly advanced powers once held over precision warfare. By the mid 2020s, the spread of modern military technologies, particularly inexpensive drones and the precision guided missiles, had begun reshaping the battlefield, leaving even the world's strongest militaries vulnerable to adversaries with far fewer resources. And then Iran, A drone brings down an Apache helicopter. Iran's destruction of an Apache helicopter in June highlighted the dilemma facing the United States. An advanced helicopter worth approximately 35 million was destroyed by a shared drone costing no more than $20,000. Not even the world's most powerful military has been able to eliminate the threat posed by low-cost drones. Iran does not need a direct military as disrupting global trade. Confrontation with the United States to achieve its objectives. Instead, it can leverage its missile capabilities, regional allies, and unconventional warfare tools to influence global maritime security and energy flows. The Strait of Hormuz crisis reflects a broader shift in the international system where confidence in global trade routes has become a key element of geopolitical power. The weapon of global disruption. Weaker powers now see challenging the United States as both possible and worthwhile. They no longer need to inflict a military defeat on Washington. Instead, it is enough to undermine confidence, impose cost, and defy expectations that once assumed their defeat. The objective is no longer to secure a conventional battlefield victory, but to generate influence through sustained disruption. Yep. Did the war on Iran mark the end of U.S. hegemony? Yeah, Trump. Good old Trump. Okay. Good old Trump. Now, the operation was carried out jointly by border guards and personnel from the Ministry of Intelligence after security forces detected PJAK members entering Iranian territory. Iran says four, four PJAK members were killed in border operation. Now, Iran's Minister of Health and Medical Education announced that 60 people were killed. Oh my goodness, 60 people were killed and around 670 others wounded in U.S. attacks on areas in southern Iran over the past 10 to 12 days. Horrible. As of Wednesday, 53 people have been killed and 592 others injured in U.S. strikes carried out during the last phase of Washington's war on the Islamic Republic. Health Ministry spokesperson Hossein Kermanpour announced the updated figures in a post on X, saying the casualty toll had risen since the ministry's previous assessment. Horrible. All these lives. Okay, here, in a major trade escalation, China has imposed immediate export restrictions on dual U.S. technology targeting 14 European companies. China, China's Ministry of Commerce stated the decision aims to safeguard national security, effectively cutting off these entities from Chinese exporters. The move fulfills earlier warnings from Beijing regarding retaliatory countermeasures against European Union trade restrictions. I don't know. It's a big mess. The United States has renewed its attack on Iran in recent days, with the strike reportedly concentrated in southern areas, targeting ports, coastal observation towers, vital maritime facilities, and civilian infrastructure. Iran says attacks killed 60, wounded 670 in 12 days. Since here, the Commission of Detainees and Ex-Detainees Affairs reported that 60 Palestinian detainees released from Negev prison were received after being freed in poor health conditions due to systematic abuse and physical torture inside Israeli occupation prisons. And this should not be allowed. There should be no torture. I mean, this is all illegal under international law, but again, it's not implied. This was posted 3 hours ago. Tensions between the two were also highlighted by a phone call in June during which Trump reportedly described Netanyahu as completely crazy. Trump heads Netanyahu heads to Washington for talks with Trump on Iran. And here a Reuters Ipsos poll found that only 1 in 3 Americans supports the war in Iran, marking the lowest level of support received since the conflict began. The findings point to declining public backing for the war, as the war on Iran drives up prices, causes severe inflation, and has driven up defense spending by trillions since February. And I would like to say that what people go through, you know, with all this bombing, I mean, people injured, people die. I mean, it's horrible. Yemeni Supreme Political Council member Mohammed Ali al-Houthi said years of U.S. Saudi aggression and attacks on Yemen have failed to deter the Yemeni people and their forces from defending themselves and advancing their capabilities. He added that the longer the battle continues, the stronger and more developed Yemen becomes, stressing that Yemen's only promise to its enemies is their resounding defeat. Okay, this was posted 4 hours ago here. Um, Explosions were heard in the skies over Erbil's sub-district and town of Khalifan. Khalifan. U.S. air defenses were activated in Erbil, reports have said. The reports did not immediately provide further details on the cause of the explosions or whether any projectiles were intercepted. This comes amid sustained U.S. aggression targeting Iran as the war rages on despite an earlier memorandum of understanding ending it. And Israeli Channel 12 reported that Netanyahu struggled to secure a meeting with U.S. President Trump until Washington sent a clear message. He could not arrive at the White House without showing something, a tangible concession or sign of progress in at least one area. According to the Israeli channel, multiple diplomatic channels conveyed that if you believe you will arrive empty handed, you will not be coming. prompting Netanyahu to demonstrate progress in Gaza before the meeting. Following discussions with the Trump administration, Netanyahu convened an abrupt emergency cabinet meeting yesterday, during which the entry of an international peacekeeping force into Gaza was approved, even though Hamas has not disarmed. Channel 12 reported earlier that Netanyahu and his officials plan to present what they've claimed was new intelligence regarding Iran's military and nuclear activities. However, the outlet failed to provide any details regarding the alleged intelligence. Previous Israeli presentations to Trump regarding Iran's civilian nuclear program and allegations over violations of commitments have directly influenced U.S. policy decisions, according to media reports. And Israel, Netanyahu is always lying. Why the U.S. would, I don't know, believe anything he says. This is horrible. Shockwaves caused by the blast carried out by the Israeli occupation forces reached villages far from the location where the explosions were carried out, as Israeli attacks continue across southern Lebanon. Of course, despite a framework, this is so ridiculous. You have these meetings, you say there's a framework, we're going to work together, and then Israel doesn't keep its end of the bargain. You claim ceasefire, but it doesn't apply to Israel. Israel doesn't understand what ceasefire means. Despite the U.S. brokered framework signed between Lebanon's government and the Israeli occupation, Israeli explosions continue to echo across southern Lebanon. Blasts were heard from Makaba al-Qantara, Tabay, Kafat Tebnit, Hadatha, Tiri, Talusa, Ataron's outskirts, and areas between Majdal Zawan and Al Mansouri, with the shockwaves reaching villages far from the locations where the Israeli explosions were carried out. Israeli occupation forces also set fire to homes and farmland in Kantara and Beit Yahun, while explosive devices and sound bombs were dropped in areas including Ali Al Tahrir Heights and Al Mansouri. Israeli aircraft also shelled the town of Sheba and fired flares over Zawatar al Sharaka. The continued Israeli attacks fueled questions over the so-called framework as Israel continues its aggression, and residents across South Lebanon continue to hear the sounds of explosions, despite assurances of de-escalation. It's always Israel says, "Oh, we're going to de-escalate. There's going to be the ceasefire they agreed to," and then they don't adhere to it. U.S. brokered framework collides with reality. Israeli explosions shake South Lebanon. Horrible. Israeli attacks, shelling kill 3 Palestinians across Gaza. Amid the continued aggression and siege, Gaza's health ministry warned that the countdown has begun for the suspension of transport buses carrying medical staff and patients due to a severe depletion of essential operating supplies. And the so-called ceasefire in Gaza, where Israel continues doing what it does. No one can control Israel. It's maddening. Or as, the article we just were talking about, this is what the U.S. wants to do. The U.S. says one thing and then, tells Israel something else. we have this agreement, but no, you just can do whatever you want. The U.S. wants to control the region. Okay, and Islamic resistance in Iraq rejected Saudi Arabia's accusations linking Iraq to attacks on Saudi oil facilities, warning Riyadh against any reckless response and accusing it of attempting to divert attention from its own failures in confronting Yemen. Sorry, its own failures in confronting Yemen. In a strongly worded statement, the resistance said, while the Saudi regime continues to throw accusations at Iraq, claiming it was the source of the attack on its oil facilities in the eastern province and Riyadh, such allegations only reinforce our conviction that hostility towards Iraq and its people is an inherent trait of this regime. It further described these baseless allegations as nothing more than an attempt to justify its inability to respond to the painful Yemeni strikes that reached deep into its infrastructure. The resistance further warned Saudi Arabia, stating that any reckless Saudi action will be met with a severe response that will leave them bitterly regretting their decisions. It also added, if there is a single wise man among you, then today you are in far greater need of lifting the unjust blockade imposed on the Yemeni people than of pointing fingers in every direction to justify your failures and conceal your crimes. You fear Yemen's response. Iraqi resistance blasts Saudi Arabia's accusations against Iraq. Okay. During the NATO summit in Turkey earlier this month, Trump signaled he was open to resuming aircraft sales to Ankara, calling Turkey much more loyal than other countries that we think would be loyal. And here's Ben Gvir calls Trump naive. Ben Gvir calls Trump naive on Iran as Israel urges U.S. escalation. The message appeared to be rather straightforward. Israeli leaders welcome renewed U.S. military action, just not the political responsibility that could come with openly asking for it. Of course, Israel wants escalation. Khatam al-Anbiya stressed that Iran's armed forces have proven in the field that any threat or an act of aggression by the U.S. forces, which is asserted is a terrorist army, would not go unanswered and would be met with a response. Khatam al-Anbiya warns any blockade attempt is a war escalation. And Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters warned that any attempt by the United States to impose a maritime blockade against Iran would amount to an escalation of the war. According to IRIB, the headquarters said that the aforementioned comes to continue in continuation of its malicious and destabilizing actions in the region, and following the implementation of an illegal maritime blockade against Iran, as well as the United States' recent threats over the past 3 days against Iranian vessels and commercial ships, including oil tankers, in our country's coastal and territorial waters. The statement stressed the actions by the United States is considered an escalation of the war in the region, adding that Iran's armed forces have demonstrated their capabilities on the battlefield and remain prepared to respond to any further escalation. Any threat or act of aggression by that country's army will not go unanswered and will be met with a response, it declared. And then the Iran Supreme National Security Council Secretary Mohammad Bagher Sogadar stated that any column of smoke appearing in the region indicates that a site belonging to the United States has been targeted, whether militarily, security, or financial. Meanwhile, the commander of the Qatam Anbiya Central Headquarters, Major General Ali Abdullah, announced a new equation in the battle, stating that for every Iranian citizen killed, one U.S. service member would be killed. So pretty much the message is they're on guard. And obviously there's no trust where the U.S. is concerned because, when in the ceasefire agreements, and the next thing you know, Trump's ordering to renew aggression. So it's hard to take what the U.S. government says as word. NASA's Fire Information for Resource Management Systems firms recorded multiple active fire hotspots at the site, with satellite evidence pointing to significant damage on one of Saudi Arabia's most critical oil installations. And has here the satellite imagery shows a big fire at Aramco's uh, Abiquak after a drone strike. Yeah, they're all taking a beat, but this is all about the U.S. wants to control the region. Yep, there it is. Fire engulfs Aramco oil facility in Saudi Arabia after Yemeni retaliation. Okay, let me see. The UK Home Office suspended refugee family reunion applications last September, promising stricter replacement rules by spring. Nearly a year on, no new framework has emerged, and the suspension remains in force. The UK Home Office obstructs evacuation of Gaza families. Terrible. All this going on with the fuel, and here again, according to the Russian ministry, the strikes targeted fuel tanks designated for Ukrainian forces at the port of Chemorsk, as well as a military cargo vessel belonging to Ukrainian forces at the port of Mykolaiv. Russian strikes Ukrainian fuel facilities, military cargo vessels. Why there can't be diplomacy? All this blowing up. Okay, speaking to Al Mayadeen on Sunday night, former FBI Special Agent Colleen Rowley criticized the U.S. and Israel military aggression, arguing that violating both international law and U.S. constitutional standards is inherently self defeating, pointed to growing strategic similarities between fronts in the Red Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Black Sea. Rowley emphasizes that effective strategy must be grounded in legal self defense, adding that ignoring the law of war will ultimately backfire on Washington and its allies. Oh, yeah. Let me go to your comments. Okay. Yeah, well, we need a magic bullet. This was at 10:34, Kathleen said. And then Kathleen, it says at 10:35, shake, 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 drop, take cover, and hold on. Yeah. Then I'm going to take us over to Tel Azor to see what Latin America, since we spoke a little bit about that before. And here, Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, reviews progress on the Venezuela Rises plan and hands over housing units. And then Guyana rescue teams from France, Brazil, and Trinidad and Tobago continued searching for the victims' bodies from the MV Marima ferry accident, which occurred on July 18th. The tragedy left at least 72 passengers dead and about 30 missing. Horrible. Rescue and salvage operations continue in Guyana for the MV Barima ferry. And here, Venezuela acting President Delcy Rodriguez welcomed a U.S. congressional delegation as part of ongoing efforts to advance bilateral relations in strategic areas.
The Venezuelan acting president welcomes a U.S. congressional delegation as part of ongoing efforts to advance the bilateral relations in strategic areas. Acting President Rodriguez received the CODEL delegation led by Florida Republican Representative Brian Moss to review progress in key areas. The visit marks the first official trip to Venezuela by members of the U.S. House of Representatives since diplomatic ties were restored during the March 17 visit of a delegation of senior congressional staff. In this context, the U.S. authorities will meet with Venezuelan defense and anti-drug authorities on combating transnational organized crime and border security. The Venezuelan acting president welcomes a U.S. congressional delegation as part of ongoing efforts to advance the bilateral relations in strategic areas. Acting President Rodriguez received the CODEL delegation led by Florida Republican Representative Brian Moss to review progress. It marks the first official trip to Venezuela by members of the U.S. House of Representatives since diplomatic ties were restored during the March 17 visit of a delegation of senior congressional staff. In this context, the US authorities will meet with Venezuelan defense and anti-drug authorities on combating transnational organized crime and border security. And the Venezuelan acting president welcomes a US congressional delegation as part of ongoing.
It's hard to hear. Okay. United Kingdom, the University of Oxford announced that the first volunteer has been successfully vaccinated. The world's first clinical trial of a vaccine designated to protect against Bundibugyo Ebola virus. I guess Ebola virus. Acting President Delcy Rodriguez reported on the ongoing efforts of the Presidential Commission for Housing Rehabilitation, highlighting that over 30,000 homes have been inspected and classified. Work is underway to restore more than 12,000 homes classified under the yellow category, structures with no structural failure that can be fully recovered for families. Okay, and Venezuela acting president Delcy Rodriguez presided over military promotion ceremony for officers, generals, and admirals of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces. In the United States, it says U.S. company Midwest Poultry Services recalled approximately 1.5 million dozen eggs produced in Texas because of possible salmonella contamination. And in China, history and culture are regarded as key elements linking the past to the future. The Chanxing Museum is one of the leading centers for preserving historical relics. But I don't know if we can hear it. That's the thing.
China, history and culture are seen as key elements connecting the past with the future. Shanxi is one of the country's regions
It's
with
very
the
low.
richest historical and architectural heritage.
Oh no! Firefighters towering flames in woodland at Li Las in the Girodonde department as a vast wildfire burned through 42,000 hectares, forcing nearly 220,000 people to evacuate. The blaze was advancing toward the Bordeaux metropolitan area with crews facing difficult conditions as they fought to prevent the flames from reaching more densely populated communities. And this is in France. Yeah, it's been horrible, the fires there. And here in sports, the Cuban delegation at the Central American and Caribbean Games in Santo Domingo 2026 is securing its path to the water polo finals and preparing for the debut of beach volleyball and rowing, among other disciplines. And in Mexico, President Claudia Sheinbaum rejected accusations from Argentine President Javier Milei, who claimed that Mexico participated in an alleged social media campaign against Argentina during the 2026 World Cup. She called the claims false and said her government does not interfere in the international affairs of other countries. Sheinbaum maintained that, on the contrary, her administration has been the target of attacks from various quarters, but insisted that Mexico does not respond in kind. Okay. Yes, Mexico rejects alleged campaign against Argentina during the World Cup. And from the South Newsbit, 1 month after the twin earthquakes that struck Venezuela on June 24th, recovery efforts continue in La Guaira, the state most heavily affected. Let me see how the sound is here.
1 month after the twin earthquakes that hit Venezuela on June 24, several temporary camps have been set up throughout La Guaira to attend to the needs of affected families. The correspondent Belén de los Santos is at one of those in Caraballeda, La Guaira State, and has more details.
Hello, studios. Exactly as you were saying, coming to you from La Guaira, particularly from the Caraballeda golf course, in this case, one of the places that we have visited throughout this month because it's one of the zones that quickly became a point of assistance and, of course, was transformed throughout this month to accommodate the different needs of every stage. For example, becoming one of the main points of health assistance with a hospital set up here and commanded by different medical volunteers and also everything in coordination with the Bolivarian National Armed Forces. You also see that this is working as a transitory camp, a place where those affected, their family members are also staying here. We are very near one of the recovery sites. This is Caraballeda, Los Cocos, one of the places that was most affected by this double earthquake. In this case, you see all the people who are having lunch right now in different shifts because that is also one of the things that are happening right now, these places, these transitory camps that have become central to this recovery efforts to providing the assistance, both in terms of material assistance, food, a place to sleep, a place to have their medical health care covered, but also a place of support, emotional, spiritual. We're just talking actually to a group of pastors that are also working organically here in the camp, the psychologists. We have seen this throughout the different transitory camps, an important part of the recovery process that involves so many areas and so many different skills in this month of recovery following the twin earthquakes of June 24th. This is a little bit of what is happening in La Guaira. Every recovery stage is happening here at the same time, of course, depending on the level of damage that each area had. So we are coming to you from Caraballeda. We will continue moving. The idea is, as always,
Okay. Now, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghai strongly criticized the recent meeting among Zelensky, Netanyahu, and Trump, calling it essentially the formation of a triangle of evil. Baghai added that the president of Ukraine's behavior is reminiscent of anarchists on the eve of World War One, and warned that the theatrical and dangerous actions could have grave consequences for Europe. And Europe's already in bad shape with all of this. United States President Donald Trump issued a veiled warning to China and Russia, threatening decisive action if those countries support Iran through the sale of weapons. He has no power anymore, Trump. What's he really going to do? He's used up a lot of his weapons. Economically, things are a mess in the U.S. And he's really doesn't have much power with anything anymore. Or he doesn't have the power he thought he had. Venezuela acting president Delcy Rodriguez announced key progress under the Venezuela Rises plan, stating that the government will deliver 4,000 homes each month through December to help families currently living in temporary shelters. The plan includes earthquake resistant housing and comprehensive community infrastructure, such as schools, outpatient clinics, and public parks. And Telazor celebrated another year of operations. 21 years ago, the channel launched its broadcast, offering an alternative source of information from the Global South perspective. Let me see if we can hear much.
In this Friday, Telesur celebrates another year of operations. 21 years ago, the channel launched its signal on air, offering an alternative source of information from the perspective of the Global South. Our correspondent, Roberto Hugo Presa, has prepared a summary of the 20 years of our multi-platform network.
Así es, ya está en el aire la señal de la nueva televisión del
On July 24, 2005, the first Telesur broadcast aired from Teresa Carreño Theater in Caracas. The day coincided with the birth anniversary of South American independence leader Simón Bolívar. It marked the realization of a vision shared by two Latin American leaders.
They are fundamental figures in Telsur's history. Its founding leaders, Commander Hugo Chavez, who was president of Venezuela at the time, and Commander Fidel Castro, who had developed this idea years before and shared with the Venezuelan president. Together, along with a group of professionals from different parts of our region, they brought this project to life, making Venezuela and Telesur a fundamental part of our life stories.
Telesur headquarters are located in Caracas, Venezuela, where the network broadcasts signal and covers major historical events around the world through a network of correspondents. Global events that shape history have been part of Telesur's coverage, bringing international news to audience through its multi-platform.
If I have to think now about the coverage that became part of history and remain in our hearts, the first one I always mention is the passing of Commander Chavez. For us, it was a very difficult coverage, extremely difficult. Celaya in Honduras as well, a coup that had a major impact not only for Central America but for the entire continent. It was a very long and demanding coverage with intense and challenging moments. In 2026, the kidnapping of President Maduro in Venezuela was another event that on January 3 woke us up and mobilized our entire news system to search for information and bring it to the screen. And then the seismic double event on June 24, 2026.
The coverage of social uprisings, global events, natural disasters, and the inclusion of voices from communities often overlooked by traditional media have turned this outlet into the voice of the people.
I believe Telesur is a tool for reflection of what is happening on the planet, in the world. Every day it becomes more difficult to understand many things. And if we do not have, for example, Telesur's interpretation of some of the events taking place, people would probably feel even more lost. So, I believe the interpretation Telesur provides of different elements of reality is very useful.
Telesur promotes peace, human rights, the self-determination of peoples, social justice, and Latin American and global South integration. The HD signal has expanded into other languages and is now evolving toward a digital multi-platform presence.
Telesur has been a pioneer in this transformation through social media, streaming production, the use of new formats, and new forms of communication. I believe Telesur has been able to adapt. There is still a lot of work to be done, but we'll continue working in this new digital area.
The network's screen is constantly renewed. Those who join this large family highlight the high journalistic standards required and the opportunities for professional growth.
Being in a television is definitely a higher level of demand. It means understanding different areas from another perspective. You have to be familiar with the realities of the global south, our countries, Latin America, economics, geopolitics. It is a very broad field. As a journalist, it represents a growth process with no limits.
Telesur celebrates 21 years of highlighting the realities and social struggles of peoples around the world, while promoting the democratization of information internationally. Its principles and values remain firmly in place.
Yeah, it was interesting. The time goes by quick. And here from the German 5th Division to the world stage, Sydney Lopez Cabra has been awarded the Hyundai Goal of the Tournament at the 2026 FIFA World Cup for his stunning strike against Argentina in the round of 32. The spectacular goal, which lit up Miami Stadium and earned praise from football legends Marcelo, marks the latest chapter in the Cabo Verde defender's extraordinary rise, whose journey has become one of the tournament's most inspiring stories. Lopez Cabral Gem wins goal of the 2026 World Cup. Ecuador and Canada signed a free trade agreement in Ottawa, expanding market access by eliminating tariffs on 99.6% of Ecuador's exportable goods and establishing new mechanisms for exchanging goods and inputs. Wow, interesting. And here, Cuba President Miguel Diaz-Canel denounces U.S. maximum pressure as sadistic collective punishment. Yeah, it is sadistic. I mean, horrible. 4 months after the Brazilian Senate ratified it, a bill to criminalize misogyny still hasn't come up for a floor vote in the lower house. Hmm. Venezuela, July 24, marked 1 month since two earthquakes of magnitude 7.2 and 7.5 shook Venezuela, leaving a trail of destruction across Caracas and the state of La Guaira, Carabobo, Brante, Aragua, and Falcon. Yeah, they've been working hard, you know, with recovery efforts. And here, political violence did not begin on the day of the 1973 coup in Chile. In the weeks before the coup, a series of actions deepened the country's political crisis, leaving a lasting mark on its history. Today, we remember one of those pivotal moments and reflect on the events that led to the overthrow of President Salvador Allende's government. 53 years since the assassination of President Salvador Allende's aide-de-camp, Commander Arturo Araya Peters was assassinated by a sniper as he arrived at his home on the night of July 27, 1973. The killing of Araya Peters was the result of a conspiracy between the far-right group Patria y Libertad and the officers of the Chilean Navy. The objective of the assassination was to help lay the ideological and military groundwork for the coup d'état of September 11, 1973. 32 members of the Patria y Libertad were prosecuted by the Naval Prosecutor's Office, but none ultimately served a prison sentence. The assassination of Araya Peters was a key element in the campaign to destabilize the government of President Salvador Allende. And here, 1 month after the twin earthquakes that struck Venezuela on September 24th, recovery efforts continue in La Guaira, the state most heavily impacted. Yeah, so we went through that. A lot of this we went through already. And President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva signed a bill into law allowing women to carry pepper spray for self-defense. Brazilian women will be able to carry pepper spray for self-defense. Okay. And here, 4 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces and settlers in this. Actually, they're thugs. Saying settlers is being nice. In the southwest of Nablus, in the occupied West Bank, another violation of the ceasefire agreement agreed upon in, well, this is the West Bank, agreed upon in October 2025. Now, this is the occupied area that Israel has no right to be there, but um, to be violent in the occupied West Bank. There's international law that talks about if a territory is being occupied, you're supposed to take care of the people, make sure everything is fine. You're not supposed to be violent with the people. But even the ICJ had said July July 24th. What was it? This was a couple of years ago with the ICJ, and talking about that Israel had to get out of Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank. They're violating international law, and they need to get out. Get out, and of course, Israel doesn't listen. People say, well, what about with the West Bank since there's all the settlements there? Israel had built these settlements. Well, the people are going to have to get out. I mean, the people know that it's against international law for them to be living there. But Israel just makes it out that, well, we have to take over the area and build settlements, and this way there can't be a Palestinian state. But that's not true. That is not true because the people would have to leave. I mean, you're there illegally. Oh, here's Madrid. The Military Emergencies Unit firefighters battle wildfire. A wildfire in Sotelo de la Adrena, west of Madrid. The wildfires ravaging areas around the Spanish capital have included the largest forest fire in the country's recent history. Okay, we talked about that. Okay, the U.S. unleashes a war against the left worldwide, says Diaz-Canel. And he says here, President Miguel Diaz-Canel led the ceremony marking the 73rd anniversary of the 1953 assault on the Moncada and Cespide barracks. This event launched an insurgent movement culminating in the triumph of the Cuban Revolution in 1959. During his speech, he denounced a campaign by U.S. President Donald Trump in, against progressive movements across the world. To justify a new form of McCarthyism, Washington is fabricating narratives that portray Cuba as the alleged center of international communism. This strategy also seeks to further tighten the economic blockade against the Caribbean nation. Diaz-Canel accused the U.S. government of pursuing a policy of maximum pressure aimed at provoking social unrest, weakening the Cuban government, and paving the way for the country's political and economic takeover. They are looking for a new excuse to sustain their political genocide against Cuba. He said before hundreds gathered in Pinar del Rio, where he concluded his speech with a call to defend sovereignty, strengthen the economy, and preserve social justice. Compatriots, the call now is for action, not to wait, not to lament, not to settle, to think as a country, to seek alternatives with boldness and creativity, to safeguard every resource as if it were the last, to produce, to substitute imports, to develop our potential, and to trust in our own strength, he said. Yeah, and that's what China did. And we'll see how powerful China is. The problem is the U.S. with all its sanctions, its blockade. I mean, it's just so evil. And here, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun defended the need for the United Nations interim force in Lebanon to remain in the country's south. The President Aoun calls for UN peacekeeping forces to remain in southern Lebanon. Yep. Southwestern Europe faces an emergency as wildfires in France and Spain have spread and continue to rage. Yes. And Nuevo Leon experienced an economic impact of 10 billion pesos, 570 million, after hosting four FIFA World Cup 2024 matches in Monterrey. Authorities view this result as a starting point for consolidating the city as a tourism destination. Mexican state sees economic impact after 2026 World Cup. Chile, public disapproval of President Joseph Antonio Cast reached 54% on July 26th, up 2 points following a frontal system that caused widespread damage. The July 23rd survey also showed a deterioration in public perception of the government handling of the emergency created by the storm, with 43 out of every 100 respondents considering the executive response incorrect, 5 points higher than in previous measurement. The frontal system, accompanied by an atmospheric river, affected the southern, central, and northern parts of central Chile. Mayors of the affected areas criticized the executive for bureaucratic obstacles, slow administration release of humanitarian aid, territorial neglect, delays in declaring a state of catastrophic, and failures in prevention. According to the National Service for Disaster Prevention and Response, the storm left 13 people dead, 18 missing, displaced more than 13,500, and isolated 40,000. The agency also reported 1,600 homes completely destroyed, over 5,000 with major damage, and 27,290 with minor damage. So his disapproval ratings are up. Yep, disapproval of Chilean President Cast reaches 54% into post-storm criteria poll. Okay, China is entering a new stage of its energy transition. Beijing has announced new targets to expand clean energy use and strengthen the country's energy security over the next 5 years. So let's see if we can hear this.
China is entering a new stage in its energy transition, and Beijing has announced new targets to expand clean energy use and strengthen the country's energy security over the next 5 years. Our correspondent Bruno Falchi brings us the details.
Mm.
Greetings, comrades, from here, Beijing, where China aims to consolidate its role in the global energy transition. The National Energy Administration and the National Development and Reform Commission presented the Renewable Energy Development Plan for the period of 2026 to 2030 as part of the 15 5-year plan. China is already the world's largest renewable energy market, and this new plan seeks to accelerate that expansion. Among the main targets is reaching an installed renewable energy generation capacity of 3 billion point 5 kilowatts by 2030, with more than 2.8 billion kilowatts coming from wind and solar power. The plan also includes expanding different clean energy sources and strengthening international cooperation in green technologies. According to authorities, by 2030, nearly half of China's electricity generation will come from non-fossil fuel sources, while new energy sources will account for around 30% of the energy mix. With these goals, Beijing seeks to expand cooperation with Global South countries in the development of clean technologies. With this news from here, the capital of China, we'll go back with you in the studios.
Hmm. Yep, that's China, always planning for the future. Okay, the most important headlines of the day. Let's see. Venezuela advances reconstruction efforts after double earthquake. Palestine, Israel settlers set fire to mosques. Countries face the impact of climate change. 26th International AIDS Conference to be held in Brazil. And the Central American and Caribbean Games continue in the Dominican Republic. Okay. Okay. Pinochet had their backing. At, it's at 11:34. Okay, now, Kathleen says, keep prayer shield up. Evil incarnate is coming to the USA. Yeah, Netanyahu is pure evil. Evelina says, housing still a priority in Venezuela. This has not changed. Yes. Um, okay, here Evelyn points out that Nixon and Kissinger were behind Allende assassination. Thank you, Evelina. Indirectly, of course, and Pinochet had their backing. They crashed the economy, paving the way for the violent coup. Your typical U.S. It's just horrible. It's, and things continue on. This is all these horrible actions, overthrowing governments. The U.S. wanting to control the world. Let me see one thing over with. Here it is. Before we go. Okay, yesterday, port workers and Palestine supporters gathered in the port of Elizabeth, New Jersey, to protest the arrival of the ZIM Virginia, a cargo ship that has been transporting weapons to Israel. Oh. And then 3 hours ago, Israeli occupation forces detonate displaced Lebanese civilian homes in the town of Hadatha in southern Lebanon. Uh, After spending 14 years in Israeli prisons, Palestinian detainee Hani Hanoun from Nablus was released and reunited with his loved ones. He appeared pale and exhausted after years behind Israeli bars following reports of torture during his detention. 14 years stolen in Israeli prison. 14 years stolen. The UK Home Office blocks family reunification for Palestinians from Gaza. That's terrible. The Guardian reports that the UK Home Office is facing criticism over a series of legal and procedural barriers that have prevented Palestinian refugees living in Britain from bringing relatives out of the Gaza Strip through family reunification. The Home Office suspended new family reunification applications in September 2025 pending stricter immigration rules that have yet to be introduced, leaving even previously submitted applications on hold. It has also delayed travel guarantees required for evacuated families to fly from Jordan to the UK, insisting on biometric data that cannot be provided because the visa application center in Gaza has remained closed since October 2023. But yeah, they had no problem with yet letting people from Ukraine in. It's terrible. Israeli occupation forces stormed the city of Nablus in the occupied West Bank, as they've been doing this for years. Israeli occupation seized hundreds of dunams of Palestinian land in the occupied West Bank, while illegal settlement outposts continue to expand. The land seizure, carried out under military orders, restricts Palestinians' access to their property and strengthens Israeli control over occupied areas. And this is all illegal. As we know, it's illegal under international law. But they do it anyway. Israeli occupation forces storm a Palestinian home in the city of Koulia, northern occupied West Bank. I mean, this is horrible. An extremist Israeli settler, also known as a thug, attacked a Bedouin community in the Al Arya area east of occupied Jerusalem, injuring several Palestinians. Because he does what he wants. I mean, it's horrible. Horrible. According to the Mata Center, Israeli settler violence across the occupied West Bank continues to escalate, leaving a mounting toll of Palestinians killed, injured, and forcibly displaced, while widespread attacks on homes, farmland, and property deepen Israel's campaign of dispossession. And the key word is occupied. These are occupied territories, and this is all illegal under international law. Israeli occupation forces opened fire at a Palestinian vehicle while storming the city of Koulia, northern West Bank. You know, this is all illegal, and they do it because nobody holds them accountable. I mean, this is sick. An Israeli occupation forces storm a Palestinian house in the town of Tuku, southeast of Bethlehem, in the occupied West Bank. And this is all illegal. And here, Dr. Hassan Sayed Shukri, who is a neurologist based in Syracuse, New York, a Palestinian American citizen, explains how Israeli occupation forces forcibly expelled him and his family from their house in the village of Termas, Aya, northeast of Ramallah, occupied West Bank. Okay, and
Okay, go ahead, doctor. So you're here on a short vacation to your hometown of Termosaya, and your house basically, the soldiers came into your house this afternoon. What
Yeah.
happened?
Fortunately, around 4 or 5 o'clock in this afternoon, uh, I was inside the house. My wife called me and told me there's 5 to 6 soldiers looking for me. And I get out and found about 5 of them, and they asked me to evacuate the house within 1 hour. It's an order, it's a military order, and we did. And unfortunately, it was very inconvenient for us. They gave us to take all our luggage. He said, "You're not coming back. We don't know how long we're going to stay." And I told him I'm leaving Friday, but he said there is you need to take all your clothes, and maybe you cannot come back. Ask all your family, none of them should come to the house. The military order, and you make sure not to come back until we give you an order.
And I understand you're a neurologist in the
I'm
United States, and you are a proud American citizen who
I'm a
is
proud
flying
American citizen.
who's flying the American flag on their
I
house.
have my American flag for almost 2 years now, and I'm proud American. I'm a physician. I'm a neurologist. I've been practice in my private practice for more than 35 years. Also, I've been teaching multiple hospitals before my private practice, and I come once, twice a year to enjoy my home, my country, to enjoy uh, my home. And unfortunately, they are they took me out of this house. They definitely didn't give me even the chance to. I mean, they gave me 1 hour to evacuate,
All right.
and unfortunately,
Thank
they,
you, doctor. Thank you.
It says here, we just listened to. It has earlier today, Israeli occupation forces seized the home of a Palestinian American family in the village of Termas Aya, northeast of Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, forcibly expelled the family for several hours, and later withdrew from the property. And here, Israeli occupation forces detain a Palestinian on the road between Nablus and Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Israel is not supposed to be there. Um, they're the occupier. They're supposed to make sure everything's okay. They're not supposed to be there in a violent way the way they are. But we all know they want to steal the land. And the UN and we look at international law, nothing's being done to stop them. And here, a group of colonial Israeli settlers forced around 10 Palestinian workers to leave a quarry near the town of Tabe in the occupied West Bank. The workers did not resist or confront the settlers, or we could say the thugs, fearing retaliation from Israeli occupation forces, which routinely provide protection to settlers or the thugs during such attacks. I mean, it's sick. So basically, they're just harassing them until they leave. I mean, this is all illegal. It's all illegal. And no one's doing anything to stop them. Words are being used, but there's no action on the ground stopping. And then 7 hours ago, Israeli occupation forces detonate displaced Lebanese homes in the town of Talosa, a Tarun, and Kfar Tebtit, southern Lebanon. And everything they do is illegal, and no one stops them. Earlier today, Israeli occupation forces seized the home, oh yeah, we just talked about that, of a Palestinian American family in the village of Termas area northeast of Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, forcibly expelled the family for several hours, and later withdrew from the property. They just go into somebody's house. Israeli occupation soldiers shot and abduct a Palestinian at Al Mukhtar roundabout in the southern area of Hebron city in the southern occupied West Bank. This is Palestine, and like we said, Israel's violating international law, and nobody's doing anything to stop them. Action is needed on the ground, not a bunch of words of condemnation. Action to stop Israel from what it's doing. And here, Israeli occupation forces storm the Doha area west of Bethlehem in the southern occupied West Bank, and nobody's stopping Israel. And the Palestinian Red Crescent reports 2 Palestinians were injured in attacks by extremist Israeli thugs in Jabba, north of occupied Jerusalem. And no one's stopping them. I mean, this is sick. And this is Lebanon on a church. It has footage shows the destruction left behind after relentless Israeli attacks on a local church in Zawata el Gharbaya, southern Lebanon, with the building's walls bearing visible bullet marks and damages. Because that's what they do. They're always attacking churches, people's places of worship. And no one stops them. We went through that already. Oh, here. Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said, President Donald Trump is a businessman, but he is extremely naive when it comes to Iran. He added, negotiations with the Iranians are pointless. The only language that should be used is through the sight of a rifle. That's him. That's Ben-Gvir. And Palestinian killed in Israeli strike on Gaza after losing family members in previous attack. Yeah. Daoush had already lost his parents, his wife, and children in previous Israeli attacks during the genocidal war on Gaza. They're just continuing with their thuggery. Under the protection of Israeli occupation forces, Israeli thugs brutally attack Palestinians on the outskirts of Beit Dajan village east of Nablus, injuring elderly Palestinian Yasser al-Hajj Mohammed. Because this is what they do. They're just so evil. And Gaza's civil defense teams recover the bodies of 99 Palestinians from beneath the rubble of a residential block belonging to the Abu Sharia family in Al Sabra neighborhood south of Gaza City. The family home, had been targeted by Israel during its genocidal war on Gaza, leaving dozens of victims buried under the destroyed buildings for months before they were finally retrieved. It's just so horrific. The moment a Palestinian killed and several injured arrived at the hospital after an Israeli airstrike in Jabalia al-Balad, northern Gaza. And there's supposed to be a ceasefire that Israel doesn't know what ceasefire means. And here's the memorial. A memorial dedicated for Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez by a child in the Gaza Strip became a message of hope. Child Leon Al Guire picked up a paintbrush and painted Spain's Prime Minister on a wall of a destroyed home in Gaza. We love the Spanish people. I hope this reaches you. And it did. Days later, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez responded in a video. Thank you, Leon. Thank you to all Palestinians who found a moment to send us your love amid so much pain. The entire Spanish society hears you and sees you. I hope the day comes soon when Gaza's children can return to drawing in their schools without fear and live in peace. Leon was thrilled to listen to his video. We may not speak the same language, but we share the same compassion or the same compassionate hearts. This is the first time I've seen a leader reply to someone from Gaza. And again, one Palestinian was killed and several others were injured in an Israeli airstrike on Al-Hakar area, south of Deir al-Balah, central Gaza. Constant. And then again, Israeli settlers, or we should say thugs, lead their livestock onto Palestinian farmland in the Ain Abu Shayan area, east of the village of Atara, north of Ramallah, destroying crops. This reflects the growing use of pastoral settlement, a strategy in which settlers, or we could say thugs, establish herding outposts with livestock to rapidly seize and control Palestinian land. Just evil. And then Israeli occupation forces fired tear gas grenades during the storm on the town of Beit Farouk, east of Nablus. It's just disgusting. Then here, a billboard campaign for Israeli politician Gadi Eisenkot's Yashar party has sparked controversy in Cyprus, targeting Israelis vacationing on the island ahead of the 27 October election. Local figures condemned the ads as foreign political propaganda, linking them to concerns over growing Israeli influence through real estate investment in areas like Larnaca and Limassol. And then Israeli occupation forces set fire to displaced Lebanese homes in the town of Al Qantara, southern Lebanon. Just so much violence. And then several Palestinians were injured in an Israeli airstrike in Jabalia, northern Gaza. It's just horrific. Horrible. A supporter carrying the Israeli flag attacked participants during a pro-Palestine student demonstration in Utrecht University in the Netherlands as police intervened to contain the situation. The protest took place amid the university's invitation to an Israeli delegation, which had sparked opposition from student activists. And there we have it again. Extremist Israeli settlers storm Palestinian lands with their sheep and destroy agricultural crops in the town of Sinjil, north of Ramallah. All this is illegal and nobody stops them. Okay. Nobody stops them. Enough is enough. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders says the American people are increasingly calling for an end to U.S. military aid to Israel, arguing that the continued support has enabled the devastating humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Sanders also urged Congress to listen to the American public and stop sending weapons that fuel the war. But the U.S. is not going to do that. I mean, it's terrible. Gaza's suffering continues despite the ceasefire. It's horrific, and nobody's doing anything to stop it. Then here, Israeli settlers expand a new settlement outpost between the towns of Abween and Sidgil, north of Ramallah, as a part of an ongoing policy aimed at seizing more land, or you could say stealing more land, and expanding Israeli control over Palestinian territory. And where is the world to stop this? That's been the question for years now. Where is the world to stop this? And then former Palestinian prisoner Hani Hanun from Nablus reunites with his family after 14 years in Israeli detention. He held as a hostage for 14 years. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, running to unseat Netanyahu in October, says he will never allow a Palestinian state, even at the cost of Saudi normalization, and vows to declare Qatar an enemy state. A Palestinian detainee breaks down upon arriving in Gaza after being released from Israeli occupation prisons. The poignant moment captured his pain and exhaustion after enduring harsh conditions during his detention. When a small ball costs too much, how is genocide changing the way Gaza's children play? Gaza's children lost their childhood in genocide after Israel destroyed public spaces, safety, and freedom of movement. Amid rubble and tents, children create games from scraps and hold on to moments of joy. Israeli backed Colombian President Abelardo de la Espriella announced sweeping changes to his country's foreign policy, including scrapping plans to establish a Palestinian embassy in Colombia, a move that had been planned by former President Gustavo Petro. At the same time, he announced the reopening of Colombia's diplomatic mission in occupied Jerusalem and the restoration of full diplomatic relations with Israel. And that's why we know that the new president-elect, all that was, the U.S. government putting him in. Children have started playing with bottle caps instead of marbles. They cut them up and turn them into toys. When my mother throws away something broken, I take it and to make the children happy. The important thing is that they don't feel the difference. Hind Radi, displaced from Khan Yunis. The destruction of spaces and the high prices of toys are affecting children's mental health, contributing to fear, isolation, trauma, difficulties in social and emotional development. Where are we supposed to take the children? The parks are gone, the sea has become dangerous, and any place could become a target for bombardment. Gaza children have created their own games from cloth balls, bottle caps, and handmade toys after Israel genocide leveled recreation spaces. Toys that were once affordable have come out of reach for many families struggling to secure basic needs. Israeli occupation forces issued a threat to seize Palestinian lands in the town of Deir. De, yeah, I thought it was the other story, but in Ramallah, Deir Dibwan, and construct a military road east of Ramallah. So um, it's just the situation is horrific in Gaza, and Israel's doing the same thing in the West Bank, wanting to do the same thing. And the UK Prime Minister Burnham rejects MP's call to recognize Gaza genocide. And these people are just disgusting. Everybody sees it's a genocide and the horror that was inflicted on the Palestinian people. Look at this, destroying the land. Look at Israeli settlers or thugs establish a new settlement outpost near Nabi Musa, east of occupied Jerusalem. Dutch leader Geert Wilders toured illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank as the guest of settler chief Yossi Dagon, calling the outpost behind pogroms against Palestinians a shield of Europe for Europe. Settlements aid the security of Europe, says Zionist Dutch leader Geert Wild. That's disgusting. These people are sick. On X, American actor Mark Ruffalo on war criminal Netanyahu, you will now you will not outrun justice. You will not lobby history. You are a murderous maniac, Benjamin Netanyahu. You will always be remembered as such. Which says Israeli-backed Colombian President Abelardo de la Espriella announced sweeping changes to his country's foreign policy, including scrapping plans to establish a Palestinian embassy in Colombia, a move that has been planned. Yeah, we just read that by former President Gustavo Petro. Israeli occupation forces terrorize and detain a Palestinian woman during a raid on Jabbar neighborhood in the city of Hebron. That's what they do around the clock. I mean, this is just so evil, and the world's doing nothing. The world does nothing to stop them. Here, Israeli occupation forces demolished three Palestinian buildings containing 15 commercial shops and three residential apartments in Anza, south of Jenin. This is all illegal under international law. It's illegal, but they're getting away with it. Like, where is the world to stop this? And this is sick. The Times of Israel reported that the U.S. House of Representatives passed the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act with a value of 1.15 trillion, including 750 million. 750 million allocated to strengthen the defense partnership with Israel. Sickening, 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 sickening. And criticism and objections from some Democratic lawmakers. The bill also includes a new provision to establish a U.S. Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative aimed at enhancing coordination between the U.S. Department of Defense and Israeli entities in the fields of research, development, and military technology. The bill passed by a vote of 216 to 212 amid partisan divisions, with most Republicans supporting it and the vast majority of Democrats opposing it. I mean, this is just basic treason. Just so evil what Israel's doing in the U.S. This is the U.S. involved in all this. In a provocative escalation, Israeli occupation forces expanded their yellow line deeper into Gaza, advancing eastward towards Salah al-Din Street in the al-Tufa and al-Shuwaya neighborhoods. They also raised their flag over Palestinian homes on Meshta Street in Al Shuwaya, further tightening restrictions on Palestinians. Just evil. Evil, evil, evil. Okay, we saw that already. It's just so evil what they're doing. Oh, here's the Israeli occupation forces storm Palestinian Omar and Mahmoud al-Tawil to self-demolish two apartments in al-Shaya neighborhood of Silwan, south of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Silwan. It's just so evil, and nobody stops them, and they continue doing what they do because nobody stops them. Okay, getting back to Pinochet and their backing, and then she said they crashed the economy, paving the way for a violent coup. Yeah, it's just horrible what goes on. And here we go again. Israeli occupation forces uproot olive trees and bulldoze farmers' lands in the town of Beit Dahan and Salem, east of Nablus. Because nobody stops them. Nobody stops them. That is the problem. And they're in Lebanon again. There's Ramallah, north of Ramallah. Israeli occupation established a new settlement outpost south of Safa village, north of Ramallah. Again, nobody stops them. Where is the world to stop them? Okay, and U.S. Republican Congressman Thomas Macy said the U.S. has been significantly weakened by the war on Iran. He added, this administration has depleted our missile defenses, drained our oil reserves, sacrificed our men and women, raised the prices of consumer goods, increased our debt, and neglected our domestic needs, all for Israel. Macy has been one of the most prominent critics of the war on Iran within the Republican Party since the beginning. Along with Democrat Ro Khanna, he introduced war powers resolutions aimed at forcing Congress to vote on the war. There they go, there they are. Right now, local Palestinians are racing against time to evacuate several homes and businesses in the village of Anza, south of Jenin, after Israeli occupation forces gave them less than 1 hour notice ahead of their demolition. I mean, it's just sickening. I know, and the world cannot stop. The world cannot stop Israel. Can't stop all these thugs. Oh, disgusting. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, a staunch ally of Israel, planned to travel to Florida in early March to persuade Trump to join Israel's assault on Lebanon, but Netanyahu talked him out of it. Colonial Israeli settlers, or we should say thugs, uprooted more than 160 olive trees in the village of Susia, south of Yatta, in the southern occupied West Bank. Because nobody stops them. Where is the world to stop them? It's infuriating. This has been going on for years and nobody stops them. And here, Israeli occupation forces vandalized the grave of Palestinians Saeed Odeh and Baha Rashad in the cemetery of the village of Udayla, south of Nablus in the occupied West Bank. Just so evil and disrespectful. The Palestinian Technocratic Committee, designated to administer Gaza under Trump's plan, said that it is prepared to assume authority only after Israeli forces withdraw, as Israel continues to expand the areas under its control, violating the ceasefire. Yes, they violate all ceasefires, and there's no accountability for it. That's infuriating. Footage shows Israeli thugs assaulting a security guard before setting fire to several heavy vehicles and pieces of equipment near Ramallah yesterday. Just so disgusting. And no one does anything to them. I mean, disgusting. They do whatever they want. They violate international law, and nobody holds them accountable. And that's why they do what they do, because they're never held accountable. It's just pure evil. And this was 18 hours ago. At least 2 Palestinians were critically injured this afternoon in an Israeli drone strike on the town of Al Qawarara, north of Khan Yunis, and this is in Gaza. And then a Palestinian woman lost her pregnancy after the ambulance transporting her to the hospital in Nablus was delayed by Israeli forces at a checkpoint on Monday amid a surge in state-backed violence against Palestinians across the occupied West Bank. Okay. And then here is a little video. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez responded to a video of a Palestinian girl who painted a mural of him, thanking her and the Palestinian people for the gesture. Sanchez said the people of Spain would not forget the Palestinians, nor their pain and suffering, expressing his hope that they would one day live in peace. That's so cute. The girl, they're all excited.
Gracias, Layan, y a los artistas.
ليان في خبر حلو لإلك. بدي أوريك الفيديو هذا تمام؟ جد؟ بجد؟ عشان أنا escucha, os ve, os quiere y no os olvida. Ojalá llegue pronto el día en el que los niños.
That is so nice. She's so pretty. Look how happy she is. It was so cute. We talked about all of this. And it's just so evil. The Rawawi family was forced by Israeli occupation authorities to demolish its 3 homes in the Jabal al-Makar neighborhood of occupied Jerusalem after receiving demolition orders on the pretext or the lie of lacking Israeli-issued building permits, something you can't get. The whole thing is just for whatever reason they want to, they want to take over the region, take over the land, so that's that, and nobody stops. This is what's infuriating. For years now, Israel does what it wants and nobody stops them. There's international law, but it doesn't apply to them. It's like it doesn't apply to the US. I mean, this is wrong. The world's got to do something to stop what's going on in all of Palestine. Where is the world to stop this? Where are the forces? Where is international forces? I mean, this is it's all illegal what Israel's doing. It's illegal what they're doing in Gaza. They're not supposed to be in Gaza. Where is somebody to enforce it? To kick Israel out of Gaza, kick Israel out of East Jerusalem, and kick Israel out of the West Bank. All of it is illegal. I mean, any other country the US would be attacking them for doing the stuff Israel does. It's all illegal under international law, and there's got to be actions to stop Israel from what they're doing. It's infuriating. It really is. We've been repeating ourselves for a couple of years now. Since we've had this show, it's the same thing with Israel, violating international law, doing what they want, and the world will condemn, and nobody does anything to stop them or hold them accountable. Well, I'm going to call it a night. I want to thank everybody for being here, for spending your time with me. Later on, I should say Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Harsh Med will be with me, and we'll discuss some of the topics um, around the world, what's happening. We'll be discussing tomorrow evening, Tuesday evening at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So, join us for our discussion, and let's just continue doing what we're doing. I know so many people are trying. They're out protesting. They're writing their legislators. They're just um, doing what they can. People are sharing information on social media, commenting on different postings, doing what they can to try to stop the actions, the illegal actions. So let's just continue doing what we're doing, sharing information, and being there for each other. And let's just pray for peace in the world. Thank you and good night. Peace out.